Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of the Heartland. Today we're in a small community on the Mississippi River called Old Frontenac. Here, some of the homes look like they've been plucked off of a southern plantation during the Civil War era. We're going to find out today the history of one of these homes, take a tour with its new owner, and find out some of the history of Old Frontenac. Old Frontenac sits on a point of land that can be found off of Highway 61 between Lake City and Red Wing. County Road 2 runs past the Villa Marie Retreat Center, which was built originally by the Ursuline Sisters as an academy for high school girls in 1891. The 150-foot bell tower and much of the building was destroyed in a fire in 1969, and the school was closed shortly thereafter. The 124 acres that the Academy originally sat on was donated to the sisters by General Israel Girard, who was the most instrumental figure in developing the town of Old Frontenac. When he arrived to this area in 1854, there were just the remnants of an old French fort on this hillside. The fort, known as Fort Beauharnois, was built largely upon the influence of an earlier governor of New France, or Canada, whose name was Frontenac. The fort was originally built in 1727 on the shores of the Mississippi and rebuilt on this hillside in 1730. Over a century later, in 1854, brothers Israel and Louis Girard traveled up the Mississippi River by steamboat. Their destination was St. Paul, but when the boat stopped at Waconia, or West Landing as it was known then, they got off the boat for a few days of hunting. Here they met Bully Wells, who was a fur trader, and his wife Jane, who had acquired thousands of acres of land under the Sioux half-breed treaty. This land was being purchased from the Wells family by Everett Westervelt, the first white owner of land in the Frontenac area. When the Wells family moved on, Westervelt changed the name of Waconia to Westervelt and built a grand home on the hill above the landing, which still stands today. The Girard brothers fell in love with the area so much so that they invited their brothers Kenner and Jephthah, their half-brother Nathaniel McLean, and their mother Sarabella McLean, all to follow and eventually build their homes here as well. Sarabella, known for her ageless beauty, was the daughter of Israel Ludlow, whose acquisition of land in downtown Cincinnati enabled the Girard family to enjoy a fortune through several generations. With that support, Israel was able to buy out Westervelt and eventually accumulate over 7,000 acres of land and rename the town Frontenac after the governor he so admired. Under his influence, the town of Frontenac grew and has remained at a population under 200, a secluded village with no commercial property. Brother Lewis lived in this large home called Dakota Cottage and practiced medicine in this house called Little Dakota, which was once attached to the large Dakota Cottage and is now owned by Sue Davidson. Today's occupants of the old homes have developed covenants in order to keep the character and charm of the village alive and foremost. This is the home called Greystone that Sarabella lived in during her 16 years in Frontenac. A little further down the road, on one of the charming graveled pathways, stands the home Israel built for his son George and his wife Virginia as a wedding gift in 1889. The stone wall was added in 1905, with stones quarried from the hills in Frontenac. A tavern and inn was built during the Girards' time. Today it is a private home. The fancy trim and the peaked windows and doors are still serving the new owners well. Also during the Girards' tenure here, the Lakeside Hotel, along with individual cottages, were put up on the shoreline. The shell of it still stands. In its heyday, it could accommodate 150 guests. People enjoyed its billiard hall, boathouse, and dancing floor. They considered Frontenac the Newport of the Northwest. The dance hall became a chapel in 1940, and the resort turned into the old Frontenac Point Methodist Camp, which provided summer activities for church groups into the 1970s. The land today is privately owned. While the lower landing area was still a fur trading post, Israel chose his spot to build his home on the hilltop, overlooking Lake Pepin and Maiden Rock in Wisconsin. In a short time, he traveled back to Cincinnati to ask Kate Wood to be his bride. Her enthusiasm for Frontenac matched Israel's, and the two of them lived happily in their beautiful home on the hill. Kate gave birth to their daughter Margaret, and shortly thereafter, Israel and 3 of his brothers went off to participate in the Civil War. All 4 returned home as generals. During that time, Kate gave birth to their son George. Life could not have been more perfect for Israel in their beautiful home in a place they both cherished. Israel's greatest tragedy befell him shortly after the war, however, when Kate died, giving birth to their 3rd child. Mother and child were buried together in the Gerard family plot in Frontenac's historic cemetery. Gerard's home has more stories to tell about Kate and Israel, as many of their furnishings are still within its rooms. Other furnishings were added in the 1930s when another family occupied the home. Today's occupants purchased the home with the furnishings from both eras still intact, and we have the opportunity today to visit that home. This is Priscilla Flynn, who is the owner of one of these fabulous homes in Old Frontenac, and this one is called St. Hubert's Lodge, or St. Hubert's House. And Priscilla, welcome to the Spirit of the Heartland.
Thanks, Joyce.
Yeah, you're welcome. And tell me, why do they call it St. Hubert's Lodge?
Well, this house was built in 1855 or 6. We're not really quite sure. But General Israel Gerard came from Kentucky, I believe, by way of Ohio, and decided to build a little hunting lodge here, and he named it after the patron saint of hunting, St. Hubert. On the historic register, it says St. Hubert Lodge. I call it St. Hubert's House because that's the original sign that we found in the basement.
How long did he own the home?
He passed away in 1901.
And then what happened to it after that?
It remained in his estate, and we've looked at the deed, and it has, I think a relative's name on it who may have lived here during the early 1900s through the mid-1930s. But in 1938, Henry Thompson bought it. I believe his first name was Henry. Bought it. He was a businessman from St. Paul. And he lived here with his family during the summers. They were in St. Paul during the year. And then it went to his daughter, Alice, whose married name was Blodgett. And I purchased it from Henry and Alice Blodgett in 1997.
Now tell me about your history with the house. I know you had a bed and breakfast here for a while.
Well, yeah, we purchased it in 1997, and again, I really had no intention at that time of opening a B&B, but when we had our fire in the kitchen, it kind of put the wheels in motion as far as renovating the house. And we did very extensive work and updated all the plumbing and the electrical and the heating. And so I thought, well, gee, it would be kind of fun to run a B&B, so I did.
How was that for you?
It was really a lot of fun. I didn't have any visions of grandeur. I really didn't think that I'd be sitting on the front porch with a feather boa around my neck, sipping a glass of wine. And it was a lot of work, but it really was a lot of fun. It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be going into it.
Mm-hmm. But now you obviously don't have a bed and breakfast here anymore.
No. I started working at Mayo Clinic in 2002. And I had a friend from town who I trusted implicitly that ran it for me for 2 or 3 years. And then it just didn't fit into her life a few years ago. So we still have our license to run it as a B&B if we want to. Mm-hmm. But we're not doing that right now. And we may decide to run it as a B&B again in the future. And we'll just see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, Priscilla, it looks like a really charming home. Would you give us a tour?
Oh, sure. area here, right until the ceiling changes, used to be the maid's sitting room. But when we bought the house, it was the working kitchen at the time. It was very simple, very small. And then this area from here over was the summer kitchen. So it wasn't heated. It had really nasty, rough pine boards. It had a pantry that was located in this part of the house. And when I was here probably in January of 1997, working on one of the front rooms. I really thought that I could fix the cracks in the wall, and I was going to do some plastering. So I was working at it, and I was going to do a load of laundry. And the laundry, the washer and dryer were in the summer kitchen, which wasn't heated again. And the pipes were run through the back of the wall, and the pipes were frozen. So there was some old electrical heating tape around the pipe, and I plugged that in to thaw the pipes out. And I thought, well, I don't want the pipes to freeze again, so I'm just going to leave the heating tape plugged in, which was a mistake, because that night when I was back in Winona at one of David's basketball games, I got a call from the sheriff up here that said, your house is on fire. So there was a fire right here, and I just thought that was sanctioned from God that this wall needed to be taken out. So we took this wall out and just finished the entire area into the kitchen. And this countertop is the old Randall's baker's table. We bought it at the auction when Randall's went out of business. This is 10 feet. And then there are a couple of feet over there. And this was an old dry sink that sat on the back porch. So I just had to put them together so we could keep some of the original kitchen cabinets. The old red oak cook stove was originally here, and it was the stove that they used to cook the family meals on. We took the stove out, and then I had a grade B chimney put in so we can actually use this stove if we want to.
The stove stands in what used to be the summer kitchen. Priscilla points to the glass doors in the ceiling above the stove, which the cook could open to allow the heat to go out through the louvers we see on the outside of the house. This would allow the kitchen and house to stay cooler in the summertime.
This was kind of the turning point when I really started to love this house, when I saw this little latch. My godparents had this same latch in the house where they lived in Cambridge, Wisconsin, that was built before the Civil War. And this is the lock. That's why we lock it so nobody can come in. Little things like that really make this house fabulous. This room's called the reception room, and it's one of the original 3 rooms that were built in 1855, and they were built as a hunting lodge originally. The ceilings are very, very low, and they were built that way to keep heat in. Each one of the rooms has its own stove, and each room is closed off by separate doors, so they could just heat the rooms that they needed to use. Some of the things that are in this room, too, Henry Blodgett sent to me. Because we started writing back and forth, then he would tell me little tidbits that he thought I should know about taking care of the house. And he sent me this old metal plate. It was a print of the newspaper Minneapolis Journal when General Garrard died. So it just tells a little bit about the history of Frontenac and General Garrard. The story goes that he employed most of the people in the area. They'd line up every Saturday and he'd pay each person $1. Maintained an almost feudal estate in Minnesota. This is called the music room. This is one of the first rooms, one of the original rooms in the house too, with the very low ceilings. It had a couple of closets. There are a lot of books in this house, and most of these were published in the 1800s. And we periodically go through and read some. Actually, one I was just reading is Diary of a Physician. It's a volume. There are 3 volumes, and it's just fascinating because it's a history of the early 1830s and what medical practice was like at that time. So it's really, really interesting. And then some of these pictures, the patron saint of hunters is Saint Hubert, a Frenchman with a hart or a deer with a crucifix between his antlers. Hubert was a hunter, and he used to hunt for sport only, and he would kill anything he'd see. And the heart came out of the woods with a crucifix between his antlers, and that was a sign to Hubert that he should no longer hunt for sport, he should only hunt for food. And so he became a much more respectful hunter, and he became the patron saint of hunters. This was in the Ordway Theater up in the cities. The Blodgetts were good friends of Mrs. Ordway and used to live in her house. And they just purchased or were given this big old square grand. The piano tuner would write down the dates when he tuned the piano way back into the 1860s. These old Steinway square grands were produced in the 1860s and not for very long because they don't maintain their tuning very well.
In the music room, we begin to see the mix between the Garrard era and the Blodgett era. The horsehair settee, for instance, from the 1850s, and the radio from the 1930s. From the bookshelf, Priscilla pulls a roll of the horsehair fabric, more than likely left by Kate Garrard, to fix a possible tear in the chairs or settee. Garrard originally built 3 rooms downstairs and 3 rooms upstairs in his hunting lodge. It is a French gallery-style home. The double porches we see on the front is typical of that design and is a style Garrard brought with him from the South.
This is the most fabulous place to have a glass of wine on a spring or summer day, or a cup of coffee first thing in the morning. It's just great. Why don't we go back in and I'll show you the grand bedroom.
Before the tour of the grand bedroom, we visit 2 bedrooms upstairs that were part of the original home. The first is a charming room at the top of the stairs with the door that leads to the porch. The bed and dressers were left by the Garrards. The wallpaper and the bathroom were added by the Thompson-Blodgett family. And Priscilla's family has improved necessary fixtures and restored where it was needed.
This is actually a fun room. They used to call it the cherry room. But this paper is from the 1960s, 50s or 60s, because my cousin has the same paper in her bedroom.
The children's room, as Priscilla calls it, reflects mostly the look of the 1930s to the 1950s. The bookshelf is filled with children's books from that era. Several of the pieces, the settee for example, were perhaps left by the Garrards in the 1800s.
This chest has a little hidden drawer at the bottom. Hiding place where you put your special things.
The warmth of this room has served many generations of children. When Israel Garrard brought his wife back from Cincinnati, the 6-room hunting lodge seemed too small and unrefined for Kate's tastes, so they began to add on to St. Hubert's house. The rounded section with all the windows became the new parlor downstairs and the grand bedroom upstairs.
Looking at the 3 rooms with just 1 bedroom down here, and there was probably a kitchen that was detached, I just think that she needed something a little finer than very, very simple hunting lodge rooms with very little, the woodwork in the front part of the house is just 6-inch pine boards. This whole room is kind of an eclectic grouping. This couch was my grandma and grandpa's, and I rescued it from my aunt's basement and have reupholstered it a few times. This is one of the original stoves, which I just love. It has this, I have a candle in here, so I light this in the winter. It has a little screen.
The wood box and cast iron Franklin stove sit in the parlor where Kate and Israel Garrard placed them to warm their new parlor and dining room. Many of their dishes still sit in the cupboards, along with the dishes added by the Thompson-Blodgett family.
This is the interesting thing that kind of endeared me to the house is the lady I bought it from was 7 years old when her parents bought this house, and they were the Thompsons from St. Paul. And when I bought this house, my daughter was 7 years old, and she had 3 boys and a girl, and I had 3 boys and a girl. And some of the dishes that were in this room were called Priscilla. So I thought, oh, this is meant to be. And I think it was easier for her to sell, too, because we were kind of the same type of family that she had grown up in. And She didn't want to sell it to anybody that was going to change the house. And I didn't want to change it because this was the beauty to me, was that nothing had been changed probably since the 40s, and all they did was update the kitchen and the bathrooms. All the doors are different because they added on, as they needed rooms, they just added on like the English used to do. So there's no central hallway.
From the dining room, we head back upstairs to see the grand bedroom, which is above the parlor.
This is the grand bedroom. This was the general's bedroom when they lived in the house. This room has a 12-foot ceiling, and it's the only room in the house that has anything higher than an 8-foot ceiling. So again, I think this wing was built when Israel Gerard's wife came out from the east, because the rest of the house was so simple that I think she really wanted something that was a little grander. The furniture was here when we bought the house. It's got this fabulous highboy that I love dearly. The shutters were here when we purchased the house. I added the shades. And the 2 chairs weren't originally here. These were my great uncle's. He was an optometrist or ophthalmologist from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But everything kind of blends. It's from the same period, so it all goes together. But this room has a lot of great natural light on a sunny day. You can see the river. It's a great place to sit and read a book.
The back of the house was added sometime after the Civil War. It included a back stairway and a bedroom for the maid.
This is where I used to stay when I ran it as a B&B. It's just small and cozy.
This is a charming little room.
I love this room. I love the color. I just love the bedspread or the duvet cover.
Priscilla takes us to another wing of the house with 2 more bedrooms upstairs. The adjoining rooms make a perfect suite for a family. The smaller of the rooms has 2 antique twin beds and matching dressers with unique pedestal mirrors, more than likely left by the Gerards.
This was one of the main rooms where the guests used to stay that would visit General Gerard's. This is where some of the authors that would visit him, I think a relation of Harriet Beecher Stowe, a few poets, I can't remember their name. One of the authors' last name was King, can't remember his first name, unfortunately. I just love this bed. It has the 4-leaf clovers, and then it has the circular inset, circular cutouts, which to me looks Celtic. It's very high, kind of has a Celtic feel. So again, I'm not sure if maybe Mrs. Thompson might have brought this in because she was Irish.
Below the 2 bedrooms of the back wing sits the grandest room in the Gerard Thompson Blodgett Flynn home.
They say it used to be a barn, and the general used to entertain so frequently that it needed an extra room for his parties. So they pushed the barn up against the rest of the house, and they made this into a banquet room. And then there's 2 bedrooms upstairs that are shut off during the winter. And this is what is really fun. These chairs, these little chairs, are very, very light, and these used to be set around the outside of the room, kind of like we use folding chairs today, and you'd sit on these and wait for somebody to ask you to dance. The clock was here. This is a Seth Thomas clock, and this clock is a reproduction of a Galileo. It's a wooden clock that Galileo designed. And then most of these dishes were here. Actually, I have quite a few in the other room that used to be displayed in here. And then this is kind of interesting too. It's called hammered white metal. Was here, and this is just such a pretty thing. It has the St. Hubert House crest on it, the initials. When I first looked at this house, these were still oil lamps, and the lady that I bought it from had these lit, and she had the old wood-burning stove or coal-burning stove going because it was in the middle of winter, and it just smelled wonderful, and at the real low light. And we just electrified them very simply.
We're back in Priscilla's kitchen now. We've taken a wonderful tour, and the house is spectacular. It really is. I can't believe all these. You've got so many old antiques that were actually left in the house. Well, what was it like for you to buy this old home with these fabulous antiques in it?
It was like Christmas every day. I'd go through some of the drawers, and like I mentioned earlier, found all kinds of the original wallpaper still in the house, and some fabric, and any piece of molding that had come off one of the pieces of furniture. I'd go around and try to match it to the piece where it was supposed to be, glue it on. So it was really a lot of fun, but a lot of work. Redoing the rooms was really a lot of fun because I tried to, well, for instance, when I was repainting rooms, if they were wallpaper, I'd scrape through a couple of layers of wallpaper and I'd find the original color. And so the rooms upstairs are the original color. The general's room was that turquoise shade, and the room next to that was a robin's egg blue. Mm-hmm.
I think the people that originally built this house would be so happy to know that you acquired this home.
Oh, thank you. I think the general still visits periodically. A door will slam, or I'll feel something, but it's a good feeling.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Well, Priscilla, thank you so much for giving us a tour and giving us all the interesting history of this home in Frontenac.
Thanks, Joyce.
You're welcome. And thanks for joining me today. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the spirit of the Heartland.